What is up? It is week 15 Power Hour Pod here. No Proctor this week, but I am joined by Nate Nohling. You can find Nate over on Roto Grinders. Nate, what's going on, man?
Doing all right. How are you?
I am wonderful, enjoying the BTC climb. We got a fun slate, that is for sure. Two games on Saturday, which we will not be covering. We'll do like an analysis in the Slack chat for that, but we won't be covering that on the podcast. But it's kind of weird because it definitely takes away options. Um, with Kelsey, Keenan, the GOAT Keenan. I know me and you a little back and forth on Keenan versus Hopkins, but I don't know, man. What's your overall thoughts on this slate?
I I mean, I really like some of those Saturday games, which is a bummer why they're not on Sunday. But I'm also really, really glad that we get the Steelers. I mean, DK has been so dumb, so we haven't had Steelers in like 3, 4 weeks probably. So it'll be nice to actually get like some real volume down on some of the Steelers plays because I'm looking forward to getting some AB and some Bell exposure this week.
Yeah, it was like what was it? It was Kansas City who had like four or five primetime games and they were just mashing. And
Mm-hmm.
then they get off prime time and all of a sudden are
Kareem Hunt dies. Yeah.
yeah. And then we've watched the Steelers mash on prime time. So it will be nice to get them at home versus the Patriots. We'll obviously go into that game, a lot of fantasy options in that game. But let's start with the that Buffalo Miami game. Um, I think we've got Miami in Buffalo. We have Buffalo implied team total 21.3 points. Spreads at 49. Or excuse me, the over under is at 39. So I don't know, man. I'm not super into this game, but what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I think Drake is, a lock. I think,
Mm.
2 straight weeks. He's got above 75% of the team's rushing attempts and above 15% of the team targets, which is, I mean, that's insane. So only Gurley, Lev, Melvin Gordon, and Hunt had at least 2 weeks where both of those numbers across the entire season. And so I love diversified volume. It's a solid matchup. Buffalo's been egregious versus the run, and it's a really solid tag too. So like he's like the lock. He's like what I'm building my lineups around this week. Um, and I think some people will probably flock to Shady after last week's like fluky game, but I'm not about it. His targets have been way down. He averaged 6.5 targets over the first 6 weeks, and I think over the past six, not including last week, which obviously was a fluke, but it's down to like 3.8. So I don't know. I think Shady is kind of a bad chase if people are going to go there because of last week.
Yeah, I think chasing McCoy, probably not the sharp move. I will say that I was on him last week. I had nothing to do with the snow narrative, and it had everything to do with just his price and kind of the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the options. So I can definitely see your side with where you're at on McCoy last week, and I do think that chasing him again this week is not the option. And when I said I didn't want anything in this game, I should have been more specific. I meant specifically Buffalo because Drake is a lock. He's my number two play on the slate. And when factoring in salary, he's my number one play on the slate. So I think he's an absolute smash spot, just like you said. There's
And
not
that's
a,
considering like we're both saying Damien's out, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
if I don't think there's a chance he plays. If he does play, obviously that changes things quite a bit. I still think I might look at. I mean, it'd be hard for me to get off Drake fully, but yeah. So obviously take that with a grain of salt. If we get some weekend news, that changes things quite a bit.
Yeah, I think with Damian Williams, I still I don't know, man. Even if he does play, he practiced today, Thursday. So I mean, it's definitely concerning. But remember when Aaron Jones practiced, and then Jamal Williams still just saw a ton of the touches in
All of it.
Green Bay.
Yeah,
So
it's a very similar spot to that 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whatever that was.
yeah, so it's definitely tough. I definitely think there's merit to fading him in large formats, just like there was merit to fading, Geo in large formats a couple weeks ago. Even though he crushed, when a guy's going to push 40% ownership, it's always smart to take a stance on the field. Unfortunately, if you did that, it didn't pan out. But um, I think it probably wraps it up for this game. Yeah, I'm really not into it.
Yeah, I think some people might look at some of the Miami guys just because of last week, but I don't know. I think that
Y-
was pretty fluky.
Any Miami defense against Tyrod or?
I mean, potentially. I just think, narrative, but like it's like a must-win game for them from a playoff standpoint. So I think they're actually going to come out and play pretty well.
Awesome. Next game, Green Bay, Carolina. Definitely some options here. Aaron Rodgers looks like he's going to take the start. I don't know if that's been confirmed other than like coach speak and media speak. But I'm on the side that, or, taking the assumption that he's definitely playing this week, which obviously gives all of his receivers, gives the entire offense a huge bump. With the couple games that he was playing before his injury, they were averaging about 27, 28 points per game. Historically, they've been right around that number too. So a lot of points will get scored in this game. Carolina has a good secondary, but what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably going to end up fading most of the Green Bay side just because of like the unknown. And I'm more of a cash game player. And yeah, Rodgers could come back and ball out, but like I also could see him struggling, in his first game back. And so I think I'm probably going to fade most of that situation. I think Jordy's worth a look in tournaments, assuming Rodgers is back. But I think from the Carolina side, like Cam is my cash QB as of now. He's just averaging, a crazy amount of running on the ground. So that just raises his floor so much. And we know Green Bay is egregious versus the pass. So I really like the Cam Funchess stack in cash and in tournaments. So that's probably where I'm at.
Yeah, Funches has a extremely large market share of targets in that offense. Cam does get Olsen back this week. He didn't get, I don't know if it was 0 targets, but he definitely came up catchless. And I think it might have been 0 targets for Olsen last week, but he still ran close to 100% of the team routes. It was 97% last week. He's 4K on DraftKings this week, and I think he's super, super intriguing. Definitely, like you mentioned with Green Bay, just the unknown of that situation is kind of how I also feel about Olsen. And I, for whatever reason, typically have the same mentality and the same train of thought as the public does a lot of time, like initial reactions. And so I think we might be able to exploit that. I think a lot of these guys are going to be underowned. Jordy Nelson got a price correction up to $6,300, but he's still not priced appropriately if we were expecting him to do Jordy things, right? Like Jordy's closer to a 7,800, wide receiver, give or take. So I definitely think there's some things to exploit there in large field for tournaments. But yeah, in cash, I think I avoid this completely. I think Funchess is a lock in cash. I definitely think you can go Cam in cash. And then I think Olsen is intriguing in cash just because tight end is a wasteland, dude.
It is.
It's so gross this week. We might get lucky and get not Selleck. What's a Trey Burton again? But it doesn't look that way. So I think those are going to be some late injuries that we have to monitor. And so that's why Olsen's price tag at 4K is so intriguing. If he sees that Greg Olsen volume, which is kind of comparable to like Jack Doyle volume this year at 4K, it's great. Like we were exploiting Jack Doyle at $4,500, right? So just food for thought on Olsen there, because it's definitely a little bit of the unknown.
Yeah, I can definitely see the Olsen thing. I mean, here's my take on Jordy is just, he did get a price correction, but like if we just play it out and say, let's just assume for, sake of narrative that Rodgers is healthy in this. If Rodgers has been healthy the last 6 games, Jordy is 8K going into this matchup,
exactly.
And people are playing for him. So his stats with with Hundley over the past couple games is clearly priced in. So and I just don't think those stats even affect anything. Like Jordy is still Jordy. He didn't forget how to play football over the past few games. Like
right.
It was just Hundley,
Right. All right, next game. We have Cleveland, and then we've got Baltimore at Cleveland. This is one of those games where I think Baltimore is definitely going to be without Jimmy Smith, and I think a lot of people rode the Kaiser Josh Gordon train last week. Gordon, great first half, not a great second half. Kaiser ended up getting there and exceeding value, and he got a $100 price bump this week at home versus the Ravens. There's a lot of me that kind of wants to go back to Kaiser and Josh Gordon this week. Definitely not in cash, and I know you specialize in cash. But if we go over to fansharepro.com, some of the quarterbacks that are being listed are Nick Foles, Garoppolo, Bortles, Cam, Roethlisberger going down the list, right? Then you have guys like Wilson, Rodgers, etc. Kaiser is not being talked about a lot, and I feel like people are forgetting that he's kind of rushing for a touchdown every game. It didn't happen last week, but prior to that, and his last 4 out of his 6, I guess now, including last Sunday, he's rushed for like 40 some yards on an average, which is literally adding a touchdown to his stat line. And I'm not sure Baltimore's kind of been a shell of themselves. I don't know what your thoughts are on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about Kaiser for a second, I mean, he's had over 5.5 rushing attempts for the past 6 games and averaging 31 yards, 31 and a half yards over the past 6 games rushing, which is huge for his price from a floor perspective. And the nice thing about it is, like, with Josh Gordon, what Josh Gordon can do as a receiver is, like, what's Kaiser's biggest issue? His inaccuracy. And, like, that's where Gordon can shine and, like, make up for that. So I'm all about Gordon and Kaiser, I think, in tournaments. I will say I think they're going to be higher owned than we think because, you know, the narrative is – I'm hearing the narrative a lot out there that Jimmy Smith is without Jimmy Smith, this Ravens defense has fallen apart. And it's – I mean, I'm not going to go that far. I don't buy that. Like,
Sure.
they're the second best defense in the NFL through 14 games. Like, I'm not going to say Jimmy Smith is out, so – times last week, like I still think that they're going to play well, but I think Kaiser can have a big game at his salary. And Gordon's the GOAT, man. Gordon's the GOAT.
He really is, and yeah, Baltimore's defense still grades out well. Suggs, Davis, Mosley, etc. Just kind of in the front there. Pierce up front at nose tackle. So I definitely think that they can get to Kaiser. I think that they can generate pressure, and Kaiser has been known to be inaccurate. I just think it's interesting. I think that there's definitely merit to going back to them, especially because Gordon got a price bump, which typically will dissuade people, right? That usually suppresses ownership. On the other side of the ball, I definitely do like Alex Collins on the other side of the ball for Baltimore. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I really like Collins. I think at his price tag this week, there's a bunch of guys I like at that price tag. And I think the Collins Ravens D stack is a solid way to build in cash games, I think. The one thing I will warn about with Collins, his value over the past couple games is TDs. He has 5 rushing TDs over the past 4 games. And if you compare that to his expected touchdowns based on where he's actually receiving the carries, he's got the largest positive gap between touchdowns and expected touchdowns over the past 4 weeks. So that would be one like concern of mine. But I mean, he's getting the touches. And you know, I expect Baltimore to be ahead. So positive game flow. So, but there's a lot of running backs I really like, you know, with Pirine and even Latavius right there, plus Dre. I mean, there's a lot of value running backs I'm pretty high on this week. So we'll get to him later, but he's right there with them all.
Yeah, definitely like the Collins Ravens correlation there. I mean, it's definitely positively correlated. I think some people kind of overblow that, or really just think that there's this huge net of expected points between the two, but it doesn't always translate to that. Next game, Houston and Jacksonville. This is an interesting one. We had Hopkins show up on the injury report today with a toe. He's still listed as probable, though, and then obviously has an extremely tough matchup against Bouye and Ramsey. TJ Yates under center. So this game, I think, honestly, the only thing that I want out of this game, and correct me if I'm wrong, is going to be some Leonard Fournette and some Jags defense. Oh, and obviously Blake Bortles and D.D. Westbrook. I'm sorry. I don't know why I was only saying those two. I actually like the Jacksonville side of this ball. Where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, this will be, unfortunately, the first week, I think, of this season that I don't have Hopkins in cash.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's going to kill me. But with Antonio on the slate, like Brown, I don't know. Hopkins at 7.7 in this matchup just concerns me a little bit. Obviously, the volume he gets, he can make up for it. But I'm probably not going to have Hopkins in cash, and that's That's a huge thing because I'm not joking. Like I literally think I've had him every week this year, so that's gonna suck. But so I mean, a half point. Obviously, Fournette has game script and the potential to just get 30 rushing attempts in favorable conditions versus this Houston defense, which is, I mean, these guys are terrible. So I definitely think Fournette's in play. My only concern with the Bortles Dede is just the volume of passing attempts. Like I could totally see Blake Bortles barely having to pass in this game.
Yeah, I do think that's a concern for me too. I will say, like the matchup is so good. Houston's 30th in AFPA versus quarterbacks. I think they're 31st against wide receivers, but they're also really bad against running backs as well. Ranking, I think it's like 16th or 17th, so it's not like nearly as bad. It's definitely not like funneling it. They're not like bottom 5 in all of those positions. I will say Bortles has pushed 33 or more attempts, I think, in his last 5 games too. It's right around there, and it's definitely had a lot more than that. So the attempts thing is a concern. I do think we see a floor with his attempts though, right around 30, and I think I'm okay with that. And then wide receiver is pretty gross too, just like tight end, and that's kind of where I keep getting on to Dede. I think Dede's an extremely talented receiver. He kind of lost a little bit of draft stock due to some off-field problems, if I remember correctly, not because of talent or anything like that. So I think he was a preseason GOAT. So I'm all about Dede Westbrook and some Bortles this week. And that's actually where I started. I think a lot of people start with Bell or Brown, maybe a defense. I literally went right to Bortles and Westbrook on my Tuesday night build, and I haven't touched it since. I'll probably do that after the show, but I don't know. I like it. I understand.
Dede's been consistent too. I mean, since he's come in from the injury in week 11, he's not seen below a 20% target share. And we know his talent. I know Proctor was huge in preseason, and we all played him and got that money. But yeah, I mean, he's there, and if Houston is able to put up any points at all, you're in a great spot. I don't see how Houston's going to generate offense here. That's my only concern.
I agree. Well, so I guess to that, they do both rate very high in pace of play, right? So
they do.
You have two teams who are executing give or take 66 to 67 plays per game, which is second and third highest. I think it's Houston second and Jags third. Either flip flop it, but they're literally within like half a play of one another. So the pace of play here hopefully is okay. The issue is when we were targeting pace of plays like that, where it was like Kansas City and the Jets or Dallas and the 49ers, that we were typically targeting, like the Jags legitimately can shut them down and keep their offense off of the field. And that's the concern that I have. So, but it hasn't quite gotten
from this Houston team.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so next game up on the slate is Cincinnati and Minnesota. Cincinnati and Minnesota is definitely an interesting one. I think the Minnesota defense here is absolutely in play. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what I want to do with the Minnesota running backs. I really want to pair up like Murray and the Vikings running backs. Minnesota has an implied team total of 26.5 points. They're huge 11-point favorites. I keep doing like an onslaught in 150 max and just dialing up my percentages a lot with Keenum, McKinnon, and Thielen and Rudolph. And I actually like a way a lot of those teams have been looking. What are your thoughts on the Minnesota side of the ball here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the defense is an extremely solid play at 3.5. It's an 11-point spread. They just got blown out by the Bears. Cincinnati. I mean, yeah, they look bad. So I think when it comes to the running backs, I mean, it's a tough spot. One of them, it's just that their existence kills each other. I think if I was to play one, it would be Latavius, and I think McKinnon's even a little bit banged up which helps, but. I think the higher pace, Cincinnati's opposing teams do allow a lot of plays to the opposing offense. So I think Latavius is a solid floor play, and I think he's going to be in favorable like touchdown, equity spots because I don't think Cincinnati is going to be able to move the ball very much. And so, Yeah, I think Latavius is the play if you're going to play one of these two, but you also know just McKinnon's going to get in on third downs, So,
Yeah, I mean that's literally the gist of it. McKinnon, third down work, Latavius first and second. Latavius has definitely seen the lion's share of goal line work, but McKinnon's also been involved in packages around the goal line too. So it really they do truly cannibalize one another, and that's why I think it's large field entry, and you probably split them. That's the beautiful thing. They're $100 within one another's price points on DraftKings, so kind of makes it easy to split them if you're doing a handful of entries.
Yeah, the nice thing is Latavius isn't like a legit passing game. Like he does see 2 to 3 targets.
Yep.
It's not 0, which makes. I mean, I know that sounds so minuscule, but that is huge at his price tag.
Well, yeah. What's your number one rule for running backs on DraftKings, Nate?
Diversified workload. I need multiple outs.
Yep. Yeah, you need pass catching running backs on DraftKings. It's kind of as simple as that. And Murray kind of gives you a floor there. What about the other side of the ball with Cincy?
I mean, AJ Green is just this price tag. It's too cheap. He's third in the league in weighted opportunity rating at 78.1. You can comfortably project him for over 10 targets, with above 30% of his team's target share. And that's at 6.5. Like both him and Funchess to me are like, at the same price point. I'm like, I want both of them, and I know the Cincinnati team might struggle to move the ball, but like, how do you not play AJ Green at that price tag? Like that's insane. Rhodes, and I know, he's going to be shadowed, but like that price tag, dude.
Yeah, and what's crazy, Green is pushing a 40%. It's like 37.5 or something like that market share over the past 4 games for that team's of targets. Like I just at $6,500, it's crazy. I have him listed as I think my second or third favorite GPP play this week. I don't know if I can do it in cash, and I know one of the best cash theory plays, and what it truly does just have like such a positive trend is when guys see this gnarly dip in salary. So it is very intriguing to play Green. I mean, when you look at the landscape of wide receiver this week on DraftKings and you just kind of filter it by price, and you're looking at guys like Michael Thomas and Adam Thielen, who are literally $1,000 more than Green. I mean, you have Devontae Adams, who's more than AJ Green this week.
Yeah, Josh Gordon in his third game and
yes. I mean, okay,
$300 more than AJ.
How about this? Devin Funchess or AJ Green? Right? See, that's the problem. That's what I'm saying is like Devin Funchess, really big market share for targets and a great matchup with a great implied team total. And then we look at AJ Green, extreme talent. Honestly, I do think I was going to say that AJ Green, I think if I have to, I'll give him the touchdown edge, but I think they both have multi-TD upside, right? And like if when you're building large field entries and you're asking yourself, can this guy score 2 touchdowns this week? I think both of them can. So I'll probably check that box on both of them. But that's a tough decision, man. I really do.
My current cash game team has both of them.
Yeah, there you go.
And I have Funchess with a slightly higher touchdown projection just because of the team total and what I think Cam's going to be able to do to this Green Bay team. But I think AJ still has. I mean, I don't know. When you get 10 plus targets, 6.5. Like it's going to be hard for him not to kill your lineup.
No, I feel you on that. Next game on the slate is the Jets and the Saints. There wasn't anybody else on Cincy that you want to talk about, right?
No, I mean some people will look at Gio with Mixon out, but it's just too tough of a spot. Like
I'm good, and he's not a free square anymore. He's pushing a salary that I'm not really okay with at this point.
Yeah, so I won't go there, but that's it.
All right, awesome. So yeah, Saints and the Jets. No more McCown. Rest in peace, Josh McCown. What a fantastic season he was having for us DFS players and just for him in general. Dude was absolutely crushing it and just kind of living it up and enjoying that ride. So we got Bryce Petty under center. You have the typical guys outside, Anderson, Curse, like not a whole lot of injuries other than just no McCown. And I think everyone takes a huge hit. I will say the Petty to Robbie Anderson hookup could absolutely be a narrative that comes to fruition this week. But Robbie Anderson's $5,600. And I think that there's other wide receivers in that price range, especially in cash, that I'm going to look at, especially when he's running against Crawley and Lattimore. Like those really aren't guys that I'm trying to pick on, especially with Bryce Petty under center. So obviously I think, and if I'm moving too fast on the Jets here, just tell me to slow my roll and I'm being a fish and I need to look at something else. But I think we're just going straight to the Saints side of the ball. Yeah.
The one guy I'm looking at is Austin Seferian-Jenkins. And the sole reason for that is I think, he hasn't been seeing the volume that we've been wanting to, but McCown's been able to spread the ball pretty well across the field and get it deep to Robbie and do a bunch of other things where I don't think Petty's going to be able to do that. So if there's going to be some more dump offs and some, I think those are going to go to ASJ, and just his price has dropped way down, 2.9 for the touchdown equity that he has. I think he's a viable play in cash. I don't think he has tournament upside, but he's in cash.
Are you still assigning him that same touchdown equity with Petty under center?
I think so. I just don't like when they get in the red zone, I don't see them rushing the ball. I think the two people who probably benefit most from Petty, I would say, are Robbie and both think that ASJ will get some more targets.
Sharp take. I like it. On the other side of the ball, everyone's in play. Is that how we sum this up? I think what sucks is, unfortunately, me and you don't get to go head to head on Kamara, because we are both a huge believer that this dude is just what he is doing is not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. 0.69 PPR points per snap on the season, 0.8 over the last month if you scratch his concussion game. And that is it's just unreal. And like, what sucks is like he can totally do it again, and I'm just gonna ride the train that he can't, and hopefully it doesn't murder me.
I think what's happening, he's going to get more touches, and with more touches, the efficiency is going to go down. But the more touches and the more volume can make up for it. Between that volume and efficiency standpoint, where I would rather be on the side of crazy efficiency, and so I'm going to continue to have any Kamara. If Kamara, he's dealing with that concussion, if for any reason, if he's out or limited, I think Ingram makes a fantastic play. And I think Saints D is like a great play in cash. And then I think, Michael Thomas obviously is always a high floor receiver up at those price tags.
Yeah, I put Michael Thomas as one of my favorite plays this week. I think in cash and large field. The only reason I'm steering away from him as cash is just that price tag. It's really hard to get to a $7,400 receiver this week when you are trying to play one of Brown or Bell. And I think maybe we can dive into that, just like roster construction a little bit here too. But are you in agreement here that like continuing to roster Mark Ingram when the field is rostering Kamara is the sharp move to do in like 20 max and 150 max?
Yes.
All right, word.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, I don't think you want to be on the field with Kamara. I just don't. You rely on that efficiency, and I think being on the other side of that's gonna be so much more profitable for you when you're right.
Yeah, and the thing is we kind of just have to wait until we're right, and it just sucks, man. I will say, and I think you can attest to this too with your ROI, not being on him in cash has by no means killed my head-to-head or 50-50 profits in any way, shape, or form. No, I've definitely taken a hit on some 20 max stuff by literally full fade. And it's unfortunate, but I don't know, trying to have that 1 week.
Yeah, my GPP ROI, I'll be honest, has sucked since fading Kamara. But in cash, like as long as you're continuing to build high floor, and around volume and stuff like that, you're going to be fine if you miss out on a Kamara 35 point explosion. Like, especially now that his price tag's rising as much as it is, it's not going to kill you.
I agree. All right, next game is the Philadelphia Eagles at the Giants. You've got Philly pushing a 24.5 implied team total. Giants 16.5. You've got a over under 40.5. You have Foles under center here. We have Ertz, who looks like he's going to play. At least all signs are pointing to that as of Thursday evening. And then on the other side of the ball, you've got the Giants, who definitely have some intriguing plays, but I don't know if we have a lot that are cash viable. What are your thoughts on Foles and the Eagles this week?
Man, I don't think I'm going to risk Foles in cash because I just think it's unnecessary, but I don't think he's a bad play. Like 5.5 for a QB with his weapons going up against a bad defense. They're 28th in touchdowns allowed per drive. I don't think it's a bad play. The pace in this game should be really high. Philly projects to have the highest team plays this week, and I think it's fine. I earn cash, but if he's back, I don't know. His tag's a little high for me, just not knowing his connection with Foles the way that we saw it with Wentz, and it's not a great matchup. He's going to have to deal with Landon Collins a lot over in the middle. So I don't know. I'm a little bit off the passing game. More of just like, let's wait and see how Foles does. I don't think Foles is bad. I think Foles can actually perform well. I don't know if I'm ready to risk it in cash.
Which is weird since you were risking Blaine Gabbert for your real American US dollars the past 2 weeks in cash. So it's just a little weird to hear that come out of you.
Fair.
I will say you obviously have the touchdown narrative with tight ends against the Giants there. And then Foles is definitely interesting. I was on the Pete Manzanelli show the other day with 4for4 Football, and I was saying that I still prefer Bortles, even though he's a little bit more expensive. And I would actually like to take maybe a little bit of juice if somebody wanted to give it to me on Kaiser over Nick Foles this week. The industry is all over Nick Foles. You go over to fansharesports.com and you look at their pro mentions, and you have Nick Foles with 36 tags at the quarterback position, a 96% sentiment rating. So you have a little bit of people, 4% of the field kind of expressing concern there. But then below him, you have Garoppolo, and then you have Bortles, who are all kind of leading the race there for the chalkiest quarterback. And if Nick Foles is going to be the chalkiest quarterback on this slate, even if it's in cash, I'm totally willing to fade that. I play a lot of 3-mans and a lot of head-to-heads, and I'm trying to set a higher ceiling. I'm fine fading Foles and generating some leverage there, because I think Bortles has just a – I think Bortles has a higher range of outcomes, actually. I don't know why I was going to say the same.
Especially Garoppolo, too. And I think if Foles does become that high-owned, I guess a leverage that I would like is – the running game. Like J.J., I mean, here's the thing. I don't think people realize how much they already run the highest team in overall percentage of run plays this year. Yep. And I could totally see that bumping up even. It's been decreasing game by game, and I think Ajayi definitely one of these games could start really, really taking over that backfield in a way that obviously he's leading right now, but I could see him, So if you want leverage on the field and he's going to be that high owned, if Ajayi comes out and gets, 2 touchdowns at the goal line and Foles gets shut out from a touchdown standpoint, like that puts you in a great spot in 20 max.
Absolutely love that. Giants are 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position on the season. So great take on the running game there. Somebody who we kind of skimmed over, who I think is extremely cash viable due to his salary this week, is Nelson Aguilar at $4,400. Very, very talented slot receiver. Really hard to say what his market share of targets will be with Foles under center, but he currently has a 21.1 over the last 4 games, which is excellent. So, or excellent's not the right word I would use. Extremely appropriate for his $4,400
for his tag.
Yeah. Yep.
What are your thoughts on last week? Shepard only had 3 targets, and he goes up against Patrick Robinson in the slot this week. But I think a lot of people will be on him. What are your thoughts on him?
See, I didn't know how the public was going to handle going back to the well on Sterling Shepard. His price tag, $5,200, is very easy to swallow on this slate. He was limited in practice today, and I will say the last week he played 77 of 80 snaps, so it wasn't like a on the field issue. He just literally wasn't generating a high enough market share of those targets. So I do not have him in my current roster construction. I do not have him listed as a cash game wide receiver on my cheat sheet. But I do have him listed over near that like Jordy Nelson, Marquise Goodwin tier of GPP plays. And he's definitely above Jordy just from a salary perspective. And like, I think recency bias is a real thing, man. I think some people are going to struggle going back to Sterling Shepard this week.
Yeah, you definitely could be right.
Any other thoughts on that game, or you want to
No, I
move
mean,
along?
I don't want any of the Giants' rushing game. I think this sets up to be a really tough spot for them. Philly's defense is really, really tough against the run. So, yeah.
I agree. And Philly's ninth in AFPA for tight end. So Ingram at $5,600 on an already shitty tight end slate is kind of off my board too.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to punt tight end and just find the guy just because
Yeah, I think the ASJ, David Njoku, like who those are the only two guys that I keep going back to that are sub 3K and like it's gonna be brutal. And then like Olsen, I think if I can work my way to Olsen, but I don't know, man. I just think the cost that the savings that you're getting, what is 4K, $2,900. So like there's just so much cost savings there, and you're giving up a lot by trying to get to Olsen, where I do think I end up punting that tight end position. What did I say the next game was? Oh yeah, that's right. Arizona at Washington. Arizona 18.8 implied team total, so just pushing 19, and Washington 23.3, so pushing 23.5. Thoughts on this game, man? Because I think like Kerwin's in play. I think Fitzgerald in the slot is against play against Washington. I think whoever we believe is not going to be up against Patrick Peterson is in the slot. So like whether that's Grant or hopefully Crowder, like I'm not 100% sure yet. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite play of this game is actually going to be P. Ryan on the Washington side for his price tag this week. I mean, obviously that's not like a sexy play, but he's a home favorite, and I think he has a workload, and I think at that tag he falls into I don't know. There's just a lot of guys that I like around those tags, and I think he's one of them. So he's averaging 19 carries over the past 4 games with 3.25 targets, which is at his tag. That's great. And being a home favorite, that's something I like. And then I also I don't mind Crowder. I think of those guys, Crowder would be the one that I want. Tight end, you could definitely look at what we've seen what Davis can do with read out, but I don't know if I would go there.
Yeah, no, I think P. Ryan, I wrote P. Ryan up over at 4 for 4. I love him. That price tag at $4,800. The issue there is diversified workload though, right? What's his do you know what his market share of targets are in that offense? It's small. I mean, it's like the Latavius Murray type, gonna get lucky and catch 2 balls.
Yeah, I mean he's seen, so last week he had 14%, the week before 12%. So he averaged target share over the past. I mean, that's not crazy, but that's enough for a running back at his price tag. So
yeah, it definitely helps you do that tiebreaker with that salary. And Arizona's 24th in running back AFPA, and then Byron Marshall hit the IR this week as well. With that hamstring, I believe. And so you have Chris Thompson and Byron Marshall both hitting the IR. P. Ryan is legitimately in a 25 plus touch spot against the Cardinals here. I will just a knock against him. Our Washington offensive line is trash. It is just not very good. They do not grade out well for run blocking or pass protection, but the implied team total and the spread and being at home and all of those things that come with touchdown equity or that get factored into touchdown equity. And then you couple that with the dude literally being the goal line back in that offense. I think he's a great play at $4,800. And he is a very, very tough decision between Alex Collins. And I think the sharp move is to actually go with P. Ryan. And I'm going to have difficulty getting there, but I think that might be the smart move if you were, looking at those two.
Yeah. And I think neither one of them sounds like a sexy play, but I just think there's value in some of these cheaper running backs this week.
I agree.
What are your thoughts on the Arizona backfield, between Kerwin Williams and DJ Foster? I think I don't really want exposure, but I mean, I think it's something to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, Kerwin quietly handled a heavy workload with Peterson out. He had 37 touches over the past 2 games, and he has a fairly tough matchup though. Washington ranks 12th in running back AFPA, so they're definitely towards that lower part of the, or I guess higher, depending on how you look at it, portion of the scale. Like I usually don't really give merit to get teams who rank like 17th, 18th, 14th, like just kind of that middle. I want to pick on like the bottom five. But they are pretty tough. So I think really this is just like monitoring Peterson's status. So I don't know. I didn't check his status today actually, because Kerwin's just not.
I think he's leaning towards out. So
okay, yeah. So and I think the price tag at 4K is super super easy to swallow. And what's really really fun is like taking guys like Pirine and Kerwin and just putting them in your running back spot, and then doing Bell and Brown, one in your flex, and then obviously Bell in your flex, and then Brown at the wide receiver position, just trying to net all of those points because they are going to be there this week, at least Vegas, and if things play out. But obviously the NFL sucks sometimes, so we'll see what happens. But we're almost to that game actually. Any other takes on the Arizona side of the ball?
Not really.
All right, cool. So the next game is we have the Los Angeles Rams in Seattle, which is never fun for opposing teams. So what are your thoughts on the Rams side of the ball here? Because this is a fun one.
I mean, with Woods being back, Watkins, I think, takes the biggest hit. I think some Kupp. I don't actually think Kupp's role changes much in this spot with Woods back. So I think you can look at him the same. But Gurley's obviously somebody that we need to talk about. I think he probably sees a little bit more targets in this spot because I think it's going to be a little bit tougher to run the ball. But it's like if I'm paying 8.3. I just want to get up to Bell. And so that's why I think it'll be hard for me to get to play Gurley, just because with Bell right there, I think Bell's clearly in a better spot this week than Gurley. But there has been some, if you believe in coach speak at all, there has been coach speak this week about, needing to get Gurley more touches and things like that. So I could definitely see playing Gurley this week. I just don't know from a roster construction standpoint if I'm going to get there, but in a vacuum, he's a great play.
Yeah, I think the latter part of your sentence there, in a vacuum, he really is a great play. They're like Bell. I mean, there's a $1,000 price difference between the two, so like I can understand why some people would stick to Gurley and just kind of stay off of Bell, especially people buying into the narrative of like Belichick's going to shut one of them down, right? Is it going to be Brown or Bell? And maybe you just stay away from the whole thing in general. And look, there's a couple different ways to skin a cat in cash games, and quite frankly, playing Brown and Bell, like I don't think you have to do it in cash. I always think when guys start to approach that salary, it can be a little counterproductive to try and jam them in when you do have guys who could see similar workload. Definitely not like as high of an over-under, as high of an applied team total, or nearly as juicy of a matchup that Bell has versus Gurley. So Gurley's a tough one, and the public's going to struggle on this decision too. But at the end of the day, I'd probably just rest my hat on like totally fine playing Gurley over Bell, saving the grand, and maybe getting off the whole Bortles thing and just going straight to Cam Newton, right, and calling it a day or something like that. So
that's a good 2v2. To consider. And especially, I think one of the things that's going to change the way that we value Bell this week is whether or not Juju plays. Because if Juju does play, I think those 10 targets that we've been seeing might go down to like closer to 6, or something like that for Le'Veon, which definitely changes his value a little bit and brings him more on par with Gurley. What about from the Seattle side? I really like Mike Davis at his price tag.
Me too, man. I was watching some highlight reels of Mike Davis just like over the past 2 games and some of the cutbacks that he's been making. He actually looks like a running back that Seattle would like to give the ball. Decent amount of snaps over the past 2 games. Little concerned about the entire offense just running through Russell Wilson. Obviously, the guy's accounted for 80+% of that team's scores over the season. As to how that changes with Carroll giving the ball to Mike Davis a little bit more, not 100% sure. And that's kind of the uncertainty there, right? And obviously, J.D. McKissic is still involved in that backfield. So it's not just the Mike Davis show. Once again, $4,000 though, man. It's not like we're talking about a $5,800 running back. Like, he's cheap.
Yeah, he's averaging 3 targets a game over the past 3 games. He's got 31 rushing attempts over the past 2. And I think, I don't know. I think at 4K, like that tag just, I feel like he's a 5K running back, and obviously I think his touchdown equity is a little bit lower than most running backs, just because of what Russ can do. And we've seen that. But, if they get to the 5-yard line or something like that, I could totally see Davis getting a couple shots in the red zone of converting some touchdowns where that won't be McKissick's game. So, yeah, I really like Davis, and I think he was in my original cash build this week. But it's still relatively early in the week, so that could change.
Yeah, and I will say too with Seattle, I mean, they're top 10 in the league for red zone opportunities per game. So like that helps Mike Davis's touchdown equity. But what we've seen is the trend is that Russell Wilson steals all of those opportunities. So I think Wilson is actually totally a fine play. If we once again go to fansharesports.com. If you don't know Nate, we are sponsored by fansharesports.com, but they're also a fantastic tool. I used them well before they sponsored this podcast, which was actually how we developed the relationship. Anyways, Foles, Garoppolo, Bortles, Cam, Ben Roethlisberger, Russell Wilson. One of my favorite things to do, and I put this on a video on Fanshare Sports the other day, is just cross out the top 5 guys and the most tagged. And when I'm building teams, I just kind of go from the next guys. Well, that's Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Phil Rivers, who's not on the slate, and then Drew Brees. Unfortunately, those are all expensive guys, but the fun thing is that helps create a unique lineup, right? So I think Russell Wilson's a great tournament play this week. On the cheat sheet, I have him listed as my number 1 tournament quarterback this week. That's probably a flip between him and Tom Brady, just because Brady's not getting any love and is in a nut spot as well. So I like Russ. You have thoughts on Russ?
Yeah, I mean, what Russ is doing right now is crazy. The amount of load that he's carrying for this team is just unreal. And so he obviously is going to be in a smash spot. It's just price. It's hard. Like, it's hard for me to pay 6.3 for a QB in cash, but in tournaments, that's exactly what you said is sharp because nobody's going to do that, So he gets you a unique lineup construction because once you build through a 7.3 QB, it changes everything. You're not able to get up to AB and right. Lev. You're not able to do all these other things. So, and that's what you're looking for from a contrarian perspective. And so I think Russ has probably the best combination of floor and ceiling from a quarterback perspective because, he's not going to bust. We saw it last week, even in a tough matchup, he'll come out in the second half and ball out and get there, and so, yeah, Russ is a great play. It's just whether or not you can get to him.
We didn't really talk about Kupp on the Rams side of the ball. I think Robert Woods is leaning towards coming back. I can double check that in a second, but typically and historically too, slot receivers have done well against Seattle. I mean, dating all the way back for the past 3 or 4 years, slot receivers historically have done well against Seattle. I think Kupp had his bounce back game last week, obviously, after kind of being let down as a chalk cash play a couple weeks prior. What are your thoughts on Cooper Kupp this week?
Yeah, I don't think, Woods back hurts Kupp too much. And I think, like you said, historically, that's how you want to attack Seattle. So, I think Kupp's in a great spot again, and they're going to put up points. They're not going to get shut out. And so if you don't think they're going to be moving the ball on the ground with Gurley, those targets are going somewhere. So, this game is going to be a fun one to watch. I can't remember the last time we had a legitimate good NFL game to watch. And I feel like this is going to be one.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to let you know, I very slyly pulled a Sammy Reed there. And the only reason I care about Kupp is because I have a decision in my season-long league of Stephon Diggs and Cooper Kupp. So I just wanted your take on Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I'd go Kupp.
Yeah. Awesome. I think the next game on the slate there is the big one. This is where all of the fireworks should be. This is the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New England Patriots. Steelers are at home. They are 3-point dogs. They do carry a 25.5 implied team total. New England 28.5 implied team total. And there is a lot to do in this game. You talked about Juju Smith-Schuster coming back, the bike goat himself. He is probable to play. He was limited in practice on Thursday, so I definitely think it is worth monitoring, but he does carry a probable tag. Clearly, Bell, Brown, smash spots. Butler and Gilmore, if you go look at like a shadow chart and you kind of look at a database where it will show like Gilmore and Butler shadowing, and like they haven't allowed a lot of TDs recently, they haven't allowed a lot of yards recently, you need to look at the receivers that they were shadowing, because it is not Antonio Brown. I'm not saying that Marvin Jones is bad, right? But he's not Antonio Brown. So I just think that like a lot of people are going to look at those matrix shadow corner charts, yeah, whatever I just said. And I think Brown is in a nut spot. The guy defies all matchups all the time, constantly. Do we need to talk about this game other than just like get exposure?
You need to get exposure. I don't care if it's Lev or if it's Antonio. You need exposure. And if you don't have exposure, you're going to lose. Like, I don't know how else to say it. I think Antonio, to me, I'm leaning towards Antonio right now. I think it's going to be difficult in cash to get both. And so I think you're going to have to kind of take a stance, or you have to make some pretty shoddy decisions the rest of your life. But it's definitely viable. I'm leaning towards Antonio right now. I mean, the dude had 18 targets over the past 4 games, 18, 15, 12, 13. And I mean, this dude just performs. And, you know, he's the best wide receiver of our generation. And I am going to have him in everywhere this week.
Yeah. I have a pretty strict rule of always take the running back in these types of positions, right? When you have a wide receiver and a running back who are so similarly priced. Clearly the wide receiver position offers just so much more variance. It's very unlikely, you know, we see the outcome of a running back touching the ball less than 10 times is just highly unlikely for a guy like Le'Veon Bell. Clearly we've seen it with Kareem Hunt, so obviously it can happen. So I think I lean Bell here just because of that, but Antonio Brown is not a standard wide receiver. Like when AJ Green or Julio Jones are in a smash spot, it's still very likely that they see 5.5 or 6 targets, right? Like Antonio Brown just doesn't see that. The dude just eats targets for a living.
It's also, in a vacuum, I just think when I look at like my 4K, 4.8K running backs, I find a lot more playable guys than I do when you start looking at these 4K wide receivers, you know, or 4.8K wide receivers, you go, oh crap. So from an opportunity cost, I just like the Antonio team versus the Lev team. In a vacuum, Lev's a better play just because of all those things that you said. He could very easily see 10 targets plus 20 carries, you know, where Antonio could have a game where he sees 8 targets or 9 targets with Juju back, you know. So, yeah, you're definitely right. I just think, you know, roster construction this week is interesting. Like there's, you know, if you take Lev, your roster construction looks totally different than if you take Antonio, even though you have so much exposure to the same game.
I think I've definitely built a team with both. I wasn't in love with it, but then I think there's a part of me that has to remember that I'm wrong, you know, more than 40% of the time. Like at my best, I'm right, you know, 60, 65% of the time. So sometimes when I'm looking at these lineups, I just have to remember, like, I'm not going to be right about every player in my player pool. And maybe I should just go Brown and Bell and kind of embrace the Nelson Aguilar, DD Westbrook, like just literally, you know, like those 2 5,000-ish wide receivers, give or take. So I've done that roster construction. I don't hate it. I will say that Brady and Cooks are definitely in a good spot in regards to a bounce back game. If you believe in that, Cooks was trash in prime time, and so was Brady. And I think both of them could definitely excel. And just, I mean, I think I'm not going to give an analysis on Brandon Cooks and Tom Brady. We know exactly who they are. We know exactly what they are. They both had bottom 10% outcomes last week, and it is what it is. And I think that we're probably, or bottom 10 is probably a little low, maybe bottom 15% outcomes, but you know what I mean? I will say too, anybody out there playing on play draft, you can get Brandon Cooks in like the 3rd round in like 5 and 10 mans. He's at the bottom of the list, and so people aren't scrolling. So pro tip for people playing on draft.com, look for Brandon Cooks way late.
I just think analyzing this game as a whole is just dumb. Like everybody's a good play, you know. You're not like Brady's not going to be a bad play. You know, these guys are, you know, these guys, you know what they can do. Get exposure to this game.
Agreed. You just want to move on, San Francisco and Tennessee.
Yeah.
Cool. So we got San Francisco 49ers against the Tennessee Titans. We've got the Titans carrying a 22 implied point team total. San Francisco 23 point implied team total. So they are 1 point home favorites, the 49ers. And as we kind of talked about earlier, Jimmy Garoppolo is kind of in a good spot. Marquise Goodwin's in a good spot. I will say that DeMarco Murray has some pretty gnarly home road splits, but what are your thoughts on this game, Mr. Nate Nohling?
I really was excited to play Garoppolo GOAT, but then I realized DraftKings priced him up and basically put him above Jared Goff, above Keenum, above Cousins, and at same price tag as Newton, basically. He's $100 less than Newton. But I mean, I'm really high in Garoppolo. I think Goodwin's a great play as well. I don't think that connection that we saw is a fluke. Goodwin is going to get these deeper targets now that Garoppolo is there. His ADOT is fundamentally extremely different, like the offensive style versus with CJ Beathard running the show, and that's why I think Hyde has a lot less value, because the targets Hyde's going to see he's going to see fewer targets, and his targets are going to be deeper down the field, and I think that fundamentally just changes it. But I really like Goodwin this week. Really like Garoppolo. I just don't love Garoppolo's price tag, but I know people play on FanDuel and other things. I think he's got a better tag on FanDuel, I believe, but I haven't built anything on FanDuel. So, but yeah, Garoppolo, he's good. He's legit.
He absolutely is. Preseason darling, absolutely a preseason GOAT. And he's looked fantastic. And I love the hookup with Goodwin. I think people are going to be deterred off of Goodwin's hike in price. He's up to 6,000 even on DraftKings. Excellent market share of targets with Garoppolo under center. And I think that he's a good play. I like him in both formats. I probably won't be using him in cash just due to roster construction. And like I said, his salary is a little bit of a deterrent in cash game construction.
Mm-hmm. He definitely, it's a little bit like of a hard thing mentally to hit the lock button on somebody like Marquise Goodwin at that tag. But if you close your eyes and just look at his metrics, he was third in the league in air yards last week with over 200 air yards. He was just behind it, DeAndre Hopkins and Antonio Brown. And I don't think it was a 1 week fluke. I actually think it's something that we're going to continue to see. So, and Tennessee's just, you can pick on them. I just think this Tennessee team is, so I don't know. Obviously the price tag isn't fun, but DK was no joke, man, with these guys. They quickly got on it. Garoppolo being priced above. But
did I lose you?
No.
Oh, that's good. Thought I lost you for a second. Yeah, Garoppolo being priced is kind of what I caught from that. He took a gnarly salary hike, man. I would be a little more open to working him in my cash game construction if he was pushing that Blake Bortles price tag. So I think, and what's crazy is I think that $500 is actually a really big difference this week. Sometimes you can kind of just throw around that $500 and just get to a guy, but it's the cash game construction definitely has me wanting to use every dollar that I can. On the Titans side of the ball, do you have any strong takes here? As I said earlier, DeMarco has some super, super gnarly home road splits where he's averaging something like an extra 5 or 6 fantasy points per game at home. His touchdown equity is through the roof at home, which obviously there's just correlation to running backs being at home, and they're on the road this week. And I know the Niners are really good running back, or really good versus opposing teams. Excuse me. Using a running back versus the Niners is good because the Niners are bad against running backs. Dude, that should not have been that hard for me to get out of my mouth. But anyways, do you have any thoughts on the Tennessee side of the ball here?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think DeMarco is a good play. I think Delaney is another option at that gross kind of tight end position. He comes in a little bit cheaper than the 6K tags. He's in between price tiers, but I think 5.2 for Delaney is in a good spot. I think he's in a good spot. You talked about San Francisco being a good matchup just from a plays perspective standpoint. And so I think Delaney definitely is a good play at the tight end position this week, but I don't know how I feel about Rashard or any of these wide receivers. So
I agree. I think if I do get up to a higher price tight end, it might be Delaney. 23.3 market share targets on the year, pushing 25% over the past month. Lot of TDs over the past month as well. Niners have been okay against opposing teams' tight ends. I think they're somewhere around like 10th or 11th in adjusted fantasy points allowed. So right around that border fringe line of where like I start to pay attention to it. But Walker's definitely a good spot just from a volume perspective. But like you said, I don't have a whole lot of other thoughts on that too, man. So I think in general, give me your quick 30-second cash game construction this week.
I mean, I think cash game construction for me this week is going to be a little bit different than normal. Normally, it's I pay up for running back. I pay up for Lev. I pay up for Gurley. I pay up for guys like that. I'm really falling in love, and this could be a bad thing, but with Kenyon Drake, Samaj P. Ryan, Mike Davis range of guys, and I feel really solid for all those guys' workloads at their price tag. So I'm probably going to go with some cheaper running backs this week and kind of pay up for some volume at wide receiver and get guys like Antonio, guys like AJ Green, guys like Funchess, in my lineup this week. So
I agree, man. I think all of that is definitely the right play. Well, cool. You guys can find Nate on Twitter. Nate, I believe it's just Nate Nohling, right? Or is it just Nate?
Yep.
I don't know.
Nate Nohling. Yep.
Yep. At Nate Nohling. Dude probably does. Actually, not probably. He does my favorite podcast with Davis Maddock, Sammy Reed. They do the Weekend in Review over at rotogrinders.com. So please be sure to check that out. It is literally like you're not going to gain anything from it from like a knowledge standpoint unless Nate says something occasionally sharp. But they just go over the Weekend Review. It's so fun to listen to. Definitely a must listen for me. One of the few DFS podcasts that I listen to because you don't generate any recency bias from it. They don't plant any seeds in your head. It's actually a really good listen. So Nate Nohling on Twitter. Nate, I appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks again, dude.
Thanks. It was fun.